Stands in the name of the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Finance. Why did he allocate $4.8 million in the budget to the Pacific Economic Development Agency rather than making that funding contestable?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, in the first place, the appropriation in the budget does not amount to an allocation of $4.8 million to the Pacific Economic Development Agency. As I've pointed out to the member many times, there is a process of negotiation going on regarding a purchase agreement which will meet all the requirements of accountability and transparency. The government decided to allocate some money to the improvement of skills and job prospects for young Pacific Islanders, alongside tens of millions of dollars that it's allocated to any number of schemes designed to cushion people from the sharpest edges of recession, and particularly to help younger people to maintain their connection with the workforce.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
A supplementary question, Mr Speaker. When the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs reported to him and to his colleague that this agency was unproven and untested, constituted a real risk, and had not completed any projects of real note, why did he decide to maintain the exclusivity of the appropriation to that organisation despite those warnings?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, there is no exclusivity, and I think that's where the opposition are labouring under a misunderstanding. The government proceeded with the appropriation, and I would have thought that that party would welcome new money in a tough budget to help young Pacific Island people get skills and maintain a connection to the workforce. Having made the appropriation through the budget, the negotiations are going on now with Treasury and the Ministry of Pacific Island Affairs, and the member should await the outcome of that to see whether there is exclusivity or not.
The Honourable Leader of the
Supplementary
Opposition.
question. If what the Minister says is true, why is there a single line item in the budget for the Pacific Economic Development Agency? And why did his Minister of Pacific Island Affairs announce on budget day that's exactly where the money was going?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, as I said before, the appropriation process does not guarantee the money to any particular organisation. And the appropriation was made. The appropriation was made with the full knowledge that there would need to be discussion about a detailed business case. This is a completely normal process all the time by governments.
Supplementary,
the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Question, Mr Speaker. Why is the mechanism for how the Pacific Economic Development Agency is to report on its spending self-reporting, as indicated in the budget document itself, rather than the more robust reporting mechanism that generally applies to non-government organisations as set out under Section 32A of the Public Finance Act?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the member raised that question yesterday, and I can give the member the same answer. There are no special arrangements because there is no contract in place. It's very straightforward. And I would have thought that the Labor Party would be supporting the government, trying to help young Pacific Islanders maintain their connection to the workforce and get some skills. Or is the member unaware that this is the group most affected by unemployment in the recession?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, when will the Minister get it into his head that the Opposition is not concerned about the fact that he might belatedly put some money into supporting the Pacific Island community whose unemployment has doubled, but that we are worried about the lack of transparency and the shonky way in which he's put it in place?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, what I have got in my head is the alarm among the Labor Party that a national-led government is talking to the Pacific Island community and doing it so constructively. And I might point out to the member that the kind of bullying tactics that failed in the Maori community from the Labor Party will also fail in the Pacific community.
Order. Mr Speaker, supplementary question.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, in claiming that the criticism of the Pacific Economic Development Agency is based on party politics and conspiracy theory, How does the Minister explain the statement by Nationals pollster and blogger David Farrer that giving PETA $4.8 million when it has no track record is, quote, a reckless decision?
The Honourable Bill
Speaker,
English.
I'm not responsible for him, and he's wrong.
Supplementary
The Honourable
question,
Leader of the
Mr
Opposition.
Speaker. Did the Prime Minister discuss with him as Minister of Finance any funding proposals that arose out of a meeting between Mr Key in Auckland last year with PETA Director J.R. Pereira, also attended by Inga Tuigamala and Michael Jones? If so, what undertakings were made at that meeting?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I know the Leader of the Opposition is somewhat resentful of the Prime Minister's popularity, but he...
Point of order, the Honourable Leader of the
Mr
Opposition.
Speaker, that was...
Order. Now, that was totally uncalled for. A point of order was called and the House will hear it in silence. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr Speaker, I think you know what the point of order is, that it's quite unnecessary to preface the answer to what was quite a straightforward question in the way that the Minister did.
I hear the Honourable Member. The member was asked whether the Prime Minister discussed matters with him following that meeting, and I think the Minister should attempt to answer that.
When a question is asked in that sort of carping, name-dropping manner, I think you do need to ask yourself whether or not the question itself had validity, because it was just totally full of...
The member should be careful what he says. I listened very carefully to that question. I contrast with the previous question. The previous question asked by the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Minister almost had licence to say anything that is permitted in this House, because the question was a very loose question with a lot of political comment in it. This question, in front of the House now, was a reasonable question. It asked whether the Prime Minister, I think, had discussed matters with the Minister on this issue following a meeting with one Pereira and a couple of other people in Auckland sometime last year. I don't know whether the meeting took place, but the Minister should tell the House whether any discussions took place between the Prime Minister and him on this matter following that meeting. The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I'm not aware of the particular meeting, but I can tell the member the answer to that question would be no. There was no discussion about funding until at least about February or March of this year, because there was no proposition to discuss funding for.
Question number 2, Sue Kedgley.
Thank you, Mr